Hi, I'm Josh Shapiro, Chairman of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners, and I'm coming to you today from the Willow Grove Fire Company, right here in the heart of Montgomery County. First, I want to thank you for your service to the people of Montgomery County and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Your willingness to be a first responder, your willingness to train and educate and be prepared for any situation is something that we all very much appreciate. You know, right here in Montgomery County, thanks to a unique partnership between the Willow Grove Fire Company, the Upper Moreland Police Department, and the Montgomery County Department of Public Safety, we're taking education even one step further. You know, 1 in 68 children here in Pennsylvania have autism. And when first responders arrive at a scene where a child has autism, special care is needed, special instruction is needed, and special training is needed. That's why right here in Montgomery County, we've taken steps to adopt that type of training program for our first responders. I want to encourage all of you to continue with your training and to add this component to your training, to do what we're doing in Montgomery County, here in Willow Grove, and with partnership through the Upper Moreland Police Department. Again, I thank you for all that you do to keep our Commonwealth safe. I thank you for your willingness to be prepared for any situation and to make sure that our community is looked after.
I think it broke. It's all your fault.
Let me see it. This is so easy, even you could have figured this out. The input cable is attached from the hub on the component cable. You just have to plug it back in. See?
Help! Help! There's a fire.
911. Yes, hi. I'm at 212 Main Street and there's a fire.
Is there anybody else in the house? Where is he? He's in the basement? If you're all trapped in the basement, we'll go to the front door, no, sir. Alright, you got the nozzle? Oh, here, hold on. We're on the front door, right down that basement, alright? Last scene in the basement, okay? Alright, you guys ready? Let's go. Alright, go. Alright, fire's in the kitchen. You two, down to the basement, look for the AC, go for it, alright?
survivor gonna get the way. All right. Fire department, anybody in here? Fire department. I got your leg, I'm going to the fire room. Fire department, anybody here? Fire department, fire company. Anybody there here? Fire department, anybody in here? All right, open it up, let's check it out.
My name is Brian Folk. I'm chief of the Willow Grove Volunteer Fire Company serving up in Moreland Township. I've been an emergency responder for 28 years, and about 10 years ago my son was diagnosed with autism. I really saw a need for a program, and I'm proud to say my son actually goes out and helps deliver the program now. The program I developed includes some of the basic characteristics of people on the spectrum disorder, really referencing that everyone's unique. There is no two same people with autism, that each person's going to react differently. I try to tie in not only the characteristics, but how it's relevant towards the police side, how it's relevant towards the fire side, and how it's relevant towards emergency medical services, because each of those interactions would be different. Typically when we're looking for our victim inside a building, there's certain areas that we'll target: in a bed, in a tub, under a kitchen table, behind a trash can, in a closet under a pile of clothes. Someone on the spectrum may have an area that is where they'll go when they're overstimulated, scared, frightened, that might not be where we would normally look. It's going to be somewhere that they feel safe. We encourage people to take feedback from the caregivers or the family. They're going to be your best, one of the best resources that you have as far as the safety and the care of that person. Another thing I would do that may be a non-traditional thing is if we have everyone accounted for out of the house and there's someone on the spectrum, I may have them placed in the back of a police car. Not that they're in custody, but to ensure that they're not going to leave whoever the caregiver is and go back inside the house for something. For a family looking for help from a fire company, for someone on the spectrum, I would encourage them to see what they have as far as public outreach. Maybe it's something as simple as some one-on-one. If a crowd during an open house is too much for them, that they could come to the firehouse on a one-on-one session and learn about fire prevention and things that they can do to keep themselves safe. The premise alert, in Upper Moreland, we call it a special needs database. It's something that the local authorities will utilize to help someone with any kind of disability. It's actually not just for someone on the spectrum. It's anything that in an emergency situation that will support or help the emergency responders react to them. If it's something that would set the person off, or if there's some kind of medical condition or psychiatric condition, allergies to medications, where their tendencies are to hide, to run, to elope, all that information in addition to a picture is incorporated into that. So responding, an officer, a firefighter, or an EMT paramedic could say, hey, the sirens, loud noises cause this person much distress. So a block away I can shut all that stuff off if it's safe for me to do.
I think that my greatest fear for Tommy, if we were to ever have a house fire, is that he would not remember the most critical thing, which is to get out of the house. You know, that to me is the biggest fear, that he would just forget about that and go to a secret place and hide somewhere.
I think for this morning, for me, we were talking about what our fire plan was. And I know that Dante knows what to do, but his response this morning was, well, I'll put the fire out, and then we'll find whoever started the fire, and we'll take them to court. So I think that part of the issue for us is, I know that he's absorbing the information when we go over the safety information, but the problem is in that high duress situation, is that actually going to come out? I mean, what do you think about that, Dante?
I don't know. I mean, I still want to be able to do something. I mean, I want to like take a bucket and pour water on it, or if it's like an oil fire, like frying grease, then I want to take like a fire extinguisher and shoot foam to extinguish it.
Did you learn that at school?
Actually, I learned from a TV show.
Which TV show is that?
It was an educational television show when I was young.
So yeah, I think he wants to take ownership of the event to try to handle it himself. And I think that all those things are appropriate methods to put the fire out, but I think that there's this point where he has a difficult time identifying what is his responsibility, and then what's the responsibility for the emergency services or other adults that might be better prepared for that type of emergency.
If there's a house fire, my biggest fear is him running back in to get his favorite whatever it is of the week. Is it a card? Is it a toy? Is it whatever? That's my biggest fear.
I think my biggest fear with Tommy is he says he knows, but then when you ask him 10 minutes later, he doesn't understand what you're asking him. So I'm afraid that he's going to go and hide somewhere instead of getting out of the house, even though we drill it into them all the time.
Yeah, I think my fear is the sensory overload that's going to happen, and even with somebody without autism is going to be panicked, and you're hoping that your instincts kick in, but we have no way of knowing what my son's instinct would be at that moment. Like you said, you just don't have any way of knowing how they're going to react. And I've known it takes my son multiple repetitions of something before it's that ingrained in him, that he's just going to react out of instinct. And the instinct that we would like to have happen isn't always the instinct that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that when Dante was in elementary school, he actually had an issue with the sensory overload, basically from the fire alarm system. And the school district's answer to that was to basically preemptively let him know when that was when they were going to do the fire drill, which I was completely against, because that doesn't instill any kind of actual response to train him for the emergency, whether it's the drill or an actual fire. Although there was a small fire in the junior high this year, right, Dante?
No, that was last year.
Oh, that was last year?
A radiator started smoking. I think it blew up, I'm not sure, but...
And then everybody did...
And then I started to after when the fire alarm sounded, I was like, wait a minute, we already had our drill. And I was like, hey, wait just a minute. This isn't a drill, it's a real fire.
Were you worried, or did you feel like you knew what you were supposed to do?
I knew what we were supposed to do. It was only a small fire.
I find a lot of times that it's kind of like, let's just go through the paces of the evacuation procedure, and it really doesn't take into account those people who might not process that information the way that a typical kid would, if you will. Because routine is definitely something that is a comfort zone. I know for Dante, the routine makes it easier for him to process things.
The problem is if we drill every week or every once a month we need to go out the front door and go to Mr. Lee's front porch, and the front door is blocked. Someone on the spectrum, that might be all they remember. Like, we have to go that way because I'm a concrete thinker and there is no gray, it's black and white. So sometimes changing it up that, okay, let's block the front door, and if the front door is blocked or you can't access it, that you can go out this sliding glass door in our house or out the kitchen door, stay in my room and open the window and call for help.
You never know what information is being retained at the time you're doing your drill. So it might be that they might be thinking, well, it's a rainy day, there won't be a fire today. Because whenever we drill, it's always sunny out, or it's the daytime. When we all know a lot of fires happen at night. So I guess change it up, like you said.
Even the things that I'm not trying to reinforce are sometimes the things that stick, which is a concern as well. So it could be something like, well, what if we decide to exit through a window? And then you say, well, that's not really a good idea. But that part gets lost in the translation when you're talking to them. And unfortunately, in a situation where it's high stress, that could be the one thing that actually comes back. I think, unfortunately, I know that there are things that you just don't think of. And I think that's the part that when you can collaborate with other people who are in a similar situation, like all of us, the things that you may have overlooked or not thought of on your own, these types of sharing sessions are important.
I think that the best way for the fire company to help the community out is to incorporate what we're talking about today into our fire education programs, part of our open house, and just getting out to the schools and helping them develop the proper programs to teach the right way to handle these situations.
We have a large thrust at the Horsham Fire Company to do education at all of the schools in October for the Fire Prevention Month. And I think it's the exposure part of the information, although I think a lot of times after the first couple minutes of these programs that we put on for the kids, you kind of lose them a little bit. But I think even just what the small part is retained is something more than that they had before. I think that in the open house setting, I think that the kids are more engaged because it's a little bit more relaxed and they actually get to do things that they want to do.
I know Willow Grove, every October they visit St. David's to do fire prevention. And me and my dad also teach a class about safety for emergency responders.
One thing that we do is we have a newsletter that pretty much reaches every resident of the township. So we have a formal township newsletter and a fire company newsletter that we put some type of message in. We'll be promoting whatever that, if there's an industry event that happens, we'll try to tie that into how it could affect us in Upper Moreland.
I think a lot of times the difficult part could be taking that information back to where you and your loved one who's on the spectrum exist or spend the majority of their time, and having that be applicable to that space. And I think that's the challenge for all of us who sit here, to ensure that the people that we love know what we need to do in a situation where it's going to require, safety measures to evacuate safely.
I feel emphatically that it's important that people get trained and get educated as far as how to deal with someone on the spectrum. When you look at 1 out of 68 children are now diagnosed with autism, as they get older through the adolescent, teenager, and then adult years, they're still going to be in your community. Somehow, personally or professionally, you're going to be involved with someone, and knowing how to react and work with them may save a life.